Fáilte Jock, welcome along. Good evening, Trinawa. Kamani Giagiv. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live Irish Myths. My name is Anthony Murphy of Mythical Ireland. This is episode 119 of our series. You're all very welcome tonight. Varying it up a little bit, but it's an important topic, and there's a very good reason for tonight's topic, which is titled Scribes, Kings and Manuscripts, or to give it its longer title, Scribes and Kings, Religion, Politics and the Medieval Manuscripts of Ireland. Very important when one is studying Irish mythology to understand the machinations and the political undertones which prevailed in the Middle Ages during the time these myths are being written down, which may give us some insight into the politics that might have been involved. Anyway, a very good evening to everybody. Hope you're all safe and well. We haven't been together since this night last week, so hope everybody's safe and sound. On YouTube tonight, Daisy Peters is apologising, saying, I can't participate in the chat because I'm very busy at my work. I'll try to participate a little. Many blessings and all my love to Artua de Mythflix. Well, Daisy, work is important, and don't let us get in the way of it, but it's good to know that you're there anyway. Archaeoastronomy Database. Hello, Anthony and everyone. I hope you're all doing well. As always, I'm very glad to be here. I look forward to every Monday. Brilliant stuff. Welcome along. Sandrine Brady says, Bonsoir, Anthony, et les amis de la Tua. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's fine. Lovely program on Mythflix tonight. Looking forward to it. Well, bonsoir, Sandrine. And Conasatatu. Sylvia Sanchez says, hi, everyone. I'm early this time. Looking forward to today's stream. Brilliant. And welcome along, Sylvia. Marianne Dunn Kindia is along saying hello. Hello, Marianne. Hi, all. Hope all are well. It's autumn in Connecticut. Well, autumn is definitely coming in here very quickly. We had a lot of rain yesterday. But anyway, that's Ireland for you. We get a lot of rain anyway. Who can complain? Deborah Williams says hello to all my friends here from Hillsborough in Maryland. Hope everyone is doing well. All fine so far, Deborah. Daniel Fagan says, Conasatá to Anthony. Great to finally get to a live session. Reminds me of bedtime stories as a child, only now I can have a Jemson. Greetings from Ardwacha, which of course is Armagh. Well, that's yeah, that would be my nightcap of choice too, Daniel. But it's good to see you. Welcome along. Carl Deegan says hello to all scribes, kings and queens. Greetings on this lovely autumn night. Good evening to you, Carl Trinonawa. John Main says Banachti on Tua Golair os San Francisco Sio August 4 in you. Oh, it's cold again in San Francisco. John, good evening to you. Welcome along. Pull up a pew, make a dram or a brew. Make yourself feel comfortable. Pagan Tree says, good evening. Trinonawa, Pagan Tree. Marlon O'Kiermach says, Jirich Acharje, Tahulagum, Gawil Shiad, Gama, and you. All doing fine, it seems, so far anyway. And I hope you're good too, Marlon. Good to hear from you. Office Care, the Woodsies in Monaster Boys, just up the road from us here. Say hi, Anthony. Hope all are well. Yes, indeed. And same back to yourselves, of course. Josie Weatherford says, hello from Donnybrook. I'm happy to hear this new show. Brilliant stuff. Welcome along, Josie. The Full Irish GK says, Trinonawa, evening to all. And same right back at you. Robin Orr says hello from Pennsylvania. And over on Facebook, Charlene McLean Cosby takes the honour of being the first of the greeters tonight. Also top fan. I like that. Charlene, welcome along. Another top fan is Donna Jean Porter, who says hi, Giagich. And Vicky Wallace-Southall, yet another top fan, says, pardon me, hello, my lovely friends. Hello, Vicky. And of course, hello to Evan and to Chile as well. Alwyn Roy Badziak says, good evening, Anthony and everyone. Hello, Alwyn. Fáilte, welcome along. Pull up a chair. You know the story. Put your feet up by the fire. Make yourself comfortable. Janet Moran says, hello, Anthony on the tour from a wee bit north of Boston. Well, good evening to all the Bostonians. Hello, Janet. Rowan Grove says, just got back from some errands. Greetings to all. Well, the timing is good on your part, Rowan. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Another top fan, Barbara Barney, says, hi, Anthony, and hi, everyone. Jigich, Barbara. And another top fan says, who is Yvette Tillema, says, hello, Anthony. Sorry, hello, Tua. Hi, Anthony. This sounds so interesting. Well, hopefully you will find it so. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter says, hello, Anthony. Texas is in the house. Good stuff, Elaine. Welcome along. Anne Scott Doherty says, glad to be here. Greetings from Grants Pass, Oregon. Excited about the topic. Good stuff, Anne. And another Anne McCallum says, hello, Anthony and the mighty Tua. A very happy Monday to you from cool and sunny Ontario in Canada. Also cool and a little bit sunny here today, cloudy at times. Cheryl-Ann McFettridge says, work hours changed. I'm back. Cheers from Boston. Brilliant stuff, Cheryl-Ann. Great to have you along. Barb Jordan says, hello, everyone. Hello, Barb. How are you? Top fan Donna Jean Porter says, I'm in North Texas. Well, good evening to all our Texan friends. Maureen O'Leary is in the house, says, good day, all. Wish I could stay, but I'm off to therapy for a shoulder thing. We'll catch up tonight. Good luck with that, Maureen. By the way, your book's on its way. Hope that lands soon. Mark Gordon, good day from Iowa. Hello, Mark. In Iowa, Fáilte, Guji, Glan, Bonia, Androhid, Aha, Inu. Alan Hoskins says hi from Alan, Julie, and Ernie, still pawing his way with me through the excellent Island of the Setting Sun. Yeah, thanks for the brilliant picture the other day, Alan. That was it was lovely to see the pictures of all the people's books arriving and how excited they were. It was great. Gave me a great lift anyway, and lots of top fans. So, you know, Facebook has this top fan thing. So make sure if you're a top fan, claim your badge so it gets displayed. Top fan Ralph Waldron says, Tranonawa, Don Tua Golair, and the same right back to you, Ralph. LM Moore, another top fan, is saying Giaguch from Alberta, Canada. Gias Murguch, LM. Can't remember what your first name is, and I do apologize. Ria O'Leary is sending green hearts. Fáilte, Ria. Carol Barrett says, hi, Anthony and the Tua. Delighted to be with you all again, and we are exceptionally pleased to have your company. Yvette says, hi, Anthony. Hi, Tua. This sounds so interesting and something I have never studied. Yeah, I hope it opens a few eyes and a few minds this evening. Should be interesting. Neil Hughes says, Tranonawa, Anthony, and all the two are from Mary and Neil in Coatbridge, Scotland. Tea and wine at the ready. The nights are fair drawn in. Neil, I don't mind saying it to you in front of the gathered company. I spent a good bit of time at Richard Moore at the weekend, and we had long conversations, but your name came into the conversation, yourself and Mary. So Richard says hello, and he hopes you're well. But I believe you two are in fairly regular contact anyway, so you probably don't need me to tell you that. Anne Hurley, another top fan, says hello to all the lovely people. Good evening, Anne. Fáilte. Edina Spark says, afternoon, Anthony and the wonderful Tua. Don't get to be here on the live feed today. We'll catch up later. Stay safe all. No problem, Edina. Completely understand. But at least you get your hello, and you'll hear that on the replay as well. Dolmac McDermott says, hi, Anthony. August not Tua. On Tua, Fáilte, Dolmac, welcome along. Nick Eska Casterton says, good evening, Anthony. Loving reading extracts of my son Alex's copy of your brilliant book. Hello, Tua. I hope you're all staying safe and well. Can't believe I have to miss tonight, but I'll catch up for sure. No problem at all, Nick. And yeah, I imagine you two will be scrapping over that book. That's the one scenario that I imagine in my head anyway. But whether that plays out or not, you know, that's all behind closed doors, and we won't say a word about it. Ricardo Raimondo says, once again, the Celt heritage. Fáilte, Ricardo. Jackie says, Fascawa Atua. I'm so looking forward to this subject because I've been pondering many and varied possibilities for months about how the scribes monks got the myths. Yes, indeed. Samantha Healy says, good evening, everyone from Warren Point. Hello, Samantha. Welcome along. Peter Kennedy is saying greetings from down the road in Balbriggan, one of my favourite places in the world. Good evening, indeed. Tom King says, good evening, Anthony, and all the friendly Tua. Hope all in good fettle. Looking forward to story time. Good stuff, Tom, and you're very welcome along. Thanks for all the lovely pictures, especially the one of you lying flat on your back on the anvil with the book. That was brilliant. Really, really funny. Brendan Byrne says, best part of Monday evening. Good stuff, Brendan. Fáilte. Donna Jean Porter, yet another top fan, is saying hi to Evan. Ali Affy Thompson says, hello, Anthony. Giaguch, Ali. Tara McGrath says, good evening, everyone. Sláinte. Tara Alan Taff says, hello from Lyon, still in hospital, but looking forward to your program every Monday. I must be hooked. Not a bad way to be, Alan. And let's be honest, between you and me, there's worse things you could be hooked on. Rowan Grove says hello to Evan and to Vicky and Evan Seamus. Margaret Kiernan says, evening all. Banachti, Margaret. Anne Hurley, he's just making a cup of tea and listening to your lovely inspiration as always. Well, I hope the tea is nice too, Anne, but it's great to see you. Oh, another top fan. And speaking of top fans, Kristen Murray Hendry says, made it again, Anthony and the Tua. Lucky for another day off from remote learning. Brilliant. Well, from one remote learning to perhaps another evening of education, I hope. Kelly Edmiston is in the house, says, happy harvest moon time, my Tua. Hello, Kelly. I hope you are well. Mariana Dunn says, Banachdi on Tua from Alexandria, Virginia. Thank you, Anthony, for my Island of the Setting Sun, which arrived today. Wow. What day is today? Monday. The United States Post. What day did that get posted? It was definitely no sooner than Tuesday. All the Irish ones and the European and British ones went on Monday. I think that was Tuesday. That's 6 days. That's not bad. That's really not bad. Thank you, Mariana. I hope you really enjoy it. Margaret Kiernan says, hope all the Tua are holding on, staying positive. Well, I can't speak for the rest of them, but certainly we're doing our best in this house anyway. Emilia Nivas Kelly says, hola, saludos desde Argentina. Saludos. Buenos noches. I do have a couple of words. Cúpla focal. Os español. Nola Snyder says, green blessings to all from Western Massachusetts. Good evening to you, Nola. Folge. Stuart Gormley is in the house. Hello, Stuart. Sláinte, my good man, and to all the Tua, finally caught a live episode for a change. Well, it's bloody good to see you. Hope you're well. Pilar Goldstein D, or Day, is it Day or Dia? Says, happy, lovely autumn from Western Massachusetts. Yes, indeed, and the same to you. Charlie Grover says, hello, sir. Folge, Charlie, welcome along. Evan reading his book, read me some yesterday, was my birthday treat. Oh, brilliant. There's Vicky announcing to us that her birthday was yesterday. You thought you'd sneak it in without noticing, huh? Happy birthday, happy belated birthday to you, Vicky. I hope you had a nice day. Rex Fortenberry says, howdy, Anthony and the Tua. Got my peppermint tea and ready for you to crack open the ancient scrolls and give us another good yarn. Hello, Rex. Hopefully we can do that. Angel Barboni Smith says hello. And yes, Angel, your book is on its way. It hopefully left today. So if what Margaret is saying is true, it's 6 days to the States, which is really good. So fingers crossed you'll have it within the week. But look, don't hold us to it, you know. Doris O'Hara says hello, Anthony, and all the Tua. Sláinte, Doris. Patricia McAteer is in the house and says very best wishes to everyone. Patricia, you're always very welcome. Love seeing your pictures lately. Some fabulous pictures. Paul Garron is watching. Hello, Paul. Conasatatu and how's life in Rothtow? Emer Galvin says, good evening, Anthony, and got the fabulous book. Thank you. Brilliant stuff, Emer. Delighted to hear that. It feels good in the hand, doesn't it? Rowan Grove nipped into the kitchen to acquire a nice hard cider. Well, come here. If you're going to do something like that, you got to share it around the place. No, we can't do that with COVID. Let's do it virtually. Helen Guinan is in the house. Your Majesty. Was that a deep enough genuflection? Mom, I've arrived. Yes, indeed. Jim Conway says, Giagich. Hello, Jim. How are things at you? Hope you're well. Sean McEnany says, hi, Anthony and everyone. Really enjoying my copy of Island of the Setting Sun. First live show for me. Tuning in from near Ishnock in Westmeath. Brilliant stuff, Sean. Great to see you. You may have missed the episode. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but the Bealtaine episode, around the time of Bealtaine, my office right here where I'm sitting, and the Catstone or the Isle na Mirren, if you join them with a line, it passes through the porch of Dronehenge. So I'm sitting on a very sacred alignment with Dronehenge and Isle na Mirren. Robin Edgar says, hi, Anthony. I just had a very interesting, meaningful coincidence, aka synchronicity, involving Martin Byrne minutes ago. I had just finished commenting on the YouTube video of his presentation, Astronomical Observations of Stone Age Sites, in which Martin mentions my solar eclipse hypothesis about Dowd's Stone of the Seven Suns, which I only came across this afternoon, when he liked my comment about Dowd's Stone of the Seven Suns on our Brunabonia, Newgrange and Nowth Facebook about Nowth's Curbstone 41. What are the odds of that coincidence happening by pure random chance within such a small time frame? Look, this stuff, Robin, you know my feelings about it. It's absolutely packed with stunning synchronicities and coincidences, so I'm not at all surprised. Nick S. Casterton says, evening, Tom. Hope you're well. Yes, indeed. Everybody's saying hello to each other. Carol Barrett, still waiting for my copy to arrive in Galway. Yes, that should have gone out on Monday. last week. So we'll have to maybe keep an eye on that one, because that should have got there last week sometime. Paul Garan says, hello, Tua and Anthony. 3 chapters to Island of the Setting Sun, and it's getting better and better. Yeah, well, you should be hooked from the page 1, and if I fail to do that, I do apologize. And Scott Doherty said, if it wasn't for COVID, we could have Mythflix parties. Yes, we have discussed such a possibility, and of course it remains a possibility for when everything hopefully returns to normal. Barbara Murphy, another Murphy in the household from Tucson in Arizona. Hello, Barbara. Welcome along. Blue Luna Krieger says hello. Hello, Falche. Welcome along. It's Day. Okay, Pilar Goldstein Day. Okay, thank you for the clarification. I'll try to get it right from now on. Paula Snow Queen is waving. Giagwich, Paula. Donna Firer says, hi, everyone. Donna in Maryland. Hello, Donna in Maryland. I hope you're having a good day. Erica Bow says, good afternoon, Falcha. Janet Moran is bowing to the Queen. Brendan Byrne, the TV is off. Another log on the fire and a glass of red in the company of lovely people. Can't wait. Can we swap places, Brendan? Can you do this episode? And can I have the log fire and the glass of red? That sounds nice. Nicole Cardillo says hello from Rhode Island. Falcha, and good evening, Nicole. And back to YouTube in case I've missed anybody. Robin Orr in Pennsylvania. I think we said hello to. Eileen Stoop says hello, Anthony from Norway. First time here for me. Welcome along. Brilliant. Lovely to see you, Eileen. Hope you enjoy yourself here. The community will make you feel very welcome on YouTube and on Facebook. Make sure you click the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't done already. Mandy McCurl is in the house. Hello, everyone. We'll catch this episode later. Busy this evening. Have fun. That's okay. Thank you for sharing the picture of the book. Carol Deegan says, yes, funnily enough, the owl book hasn't arrived yet. I'm only down the road in Auclia. I'd say it's not far. Yeah, that's a funny one. Like, most people seem to have got their book within a day or two. The Irish ones. On post. What can I say? The Curious Celt says, hi, Anthony and folks. I have a good fire going and a fresh pot of tea. Looking forward to tonight's episode. Brilliant stuff. Stephen Walker says, made it. Cheers, everyone. Hello, Stephen. Good evening to you. You're welcome along. The video embedded in your tour page on your website has been removed because of copyright. Somebody has a copyright claim. It's probably... I do try to make sure that all of the stuff is my own. So I'll have to look at that later on, but thank you for letting me know who is that. Erath or Wyrath? Who knows who? I love your channel. Just down the road on the Boyne Road. Good man. Great content. I'm new. Brilliant stuff. Who knows who? Whose name we don't know. On the Boyne Road, presumably in Drogheda. Great to have the local viewers around. I reference you for my new vlogs. Brilliant. Sylvia Sanchez says, I'm gathering my pencils and paints. I often paint with your streams and videos. Brilliant stuff. That sounds fantastic. Okay, that's really interesting. Those videos are actually showing up here. Never mind. We'll get to that later. Who did I miss? Neil Hughes, how about getting Richard to do the talking and you sit back with a glass of wine? Yeah, that sounds like a great plan, Neil. I'll try that. Amy Wallace Dolan is saying hello to somebody. Angel Barboni Smith, Brendan, yes, good stuff. Paul Nolan, hi everyone, just relaxing after a busy weekend. Did the tour of Rathcrohan, and yes, I was in the Cave of the Cats from Paul and Tom in Mayo. Brilliant stuff, Paul. Hope you enjoyed that. Natasha Comiskey, my book arrived. Thank you. Enjoying the company. Brilliant stuff, Natasha. Delighted to hear it. Desiree Riley, I'm on the road back from Colorado, so just popping in to say hi. I'll watch the episode when I get home. Hope everyone is well. Brilliant stuff, Desiree. Good to see you. Erin Durrett is in the house. Hi, Margaret, and all dear friends, old and new. Indeed. Hello, Erin. Welcome to you. Okay, so what is that in terms of time? Oh, my goodness me, 19:30. So just a few we'll keep the announcements very quick and we can get on with the episode then. Well, the first one actually is probably a sad one from the point of view that one of our regular viewers is a lady who lives very close by here She's actually our closest viewer by far, because she only lives about 100 meters away from me here, and that's Gillian Gogarty. Well, I just wanted to say, to pass on our sympathies to Gillian, whose mother passed away in the last few days, and just to say that we're all thinking of her at this time, and that we express our deepest condolences and sympathies to her and her husband and her kids, and of course all the family at this difficult time for them, and may she rest in peace. So, Island of the Setting Sun, we've been talking about, at this point, all of the pre-orders, well, as of last week, as of last Wednesday, all the pre-orders had gone. You don't have to pre-order anymore. I have signed copies in stock here now. I should have enough to keep me going for a while, hopefully. And so, signed by both authors underneath our names. And so, in case you haven't got your copy, or you've held off on getting one, or you want to get one in future, or you want to buy one for a Christmas present for somebody, I'll just share that now. The link as to where you buy it on the website. I know that a few of you have had trouble when you've been on smartphones filling in the address. If your address is a long one, it can be difficult to fill in. My web developer was working on fixing that in the past week, so hopefully that's resolved at this point. Anyway, sorry. So there it is under Facebook. All copies signed by both authors, not just myself. Thank you indeed to all those who have pre-ordered the 2021 Mythical Ireland calendar. For years, people have been telling me I should do a calendar. And so I finally decided to take the advice and do a Mythical Ireland calendar. That, all going well, will be going to print this week. And the turnaround time is about 10 days, and then I'll post them all out. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, and if there's any change in that, I'll let you know. I'm hoping that the calendars should be with you before Halloween. They should be with you before Samhain, by the end of October, all going well. And again, I will paste a link as a comment beneath the YouTube video and the Facebook feed. It's where you can go to pre-order your calendar. Just to say that tonight's episode is based upon a long post that was published for Mythical Ireland patrons back in August. So the patrons get, a little bit of special treatment. And they were treated to this one, as I say, back in August. So look, if you're interested in becoming a patron of Mythical Ireland, supporting the work of Mythical Ireland, and also getting some rewards in the form of early access to photos and videos and podcasts and interviews, etc., then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Mythical Ireland, which I'm pasting in as a comment now. And last thing that I had to say before I started the episode in earnest is that in January of this year, I began writing another book. I am typing it, or I was typing it on a typewriter. And when COVID-19 came along and the lockdown and Live Irish Myths, it was just not possible for me to write a book while working full-time and also doing Live Irish Myths every day, which I was for 102 days, as many of you will remember. Well, the good news is that I finally found a little bit of time in my schedule to go back to writing. So I'm picking up that book where I left off. And I hope that you all have the patience to wait, because the turnaround time for writing a book and then getting it published are it takes a long time. It can take a year, it can take 2 years, but anyway, I'm doing my best to keep up with it all. In the meantime, don't worry, I'll be continuing to do as much as I can on Mythical Ireland, and I won't let it get in the way of that. So before I kind of start proper in relation to tonight's episode, I should say that there's a very good reason for the topic. It had been prompted by commentary mostly on Live Irish Myths, on various episodes as the subject came up. And so I think it's important to say that some of that commentary was quite negative. Some of it was quite derogatory. Some of it took issue with me when I was saying things like, that the Christian monks wrote down our myths and without them we wouldn't have a lot of mythology. Some people seem to take exception to that. And it seemed to me that certainly in one or two cases there were individuals who have a disdain for the church stemming from the modern scandals of the church, and that they were equating the modern church with the medieval church, which I think was kind of unfair. But then at the same time, I said, look, Anthony, the very best way to approach this is to write something about it, is to talk about the complexities of the situation in the Middle Ages. At the time the myths are being written down, who was writing them? Why were they writing ostensibly pagan mythology into manuscripts, given that they were ecclesiastical scribes? How do we explain that? What is the rationale behind that? And I suppose to either prove, disprove, or sit on the fence about it, to find out whether the claim that, a lot of our myths were saved, in quotes, by Irish monastic scribes, whether that is a fair and accurate comment. Now, I'm not sure that I have answered it definitively one way or the other, but I certainly have, I think, opened up the complexities of the situation with what I'm going to read to you tonight. And I will talk about the sources immediately after we've read. I will show you the sources, or some of the sources that are sort of invaluable to anybody who's interested in studying this aspect of history. Now, of course, we are talking about mythology that probably goes back into pre-Christian and prehistoric times, but because it was all written down in medieval times, it's described by the scholars as medieval mythology. And I think that's a little bit unfair, but I can understand to a degree why that would be the case. So this was a way of answering some of those critics who perhaps, I felt anyway, in a few cases, and there were a few cases where people sort of sent messages and emails, and it seemed to me that their own bias was clouding their judgment with regard to the fairness of what they were saying. At the same time, I felt the onus was on me if I was making these comments in videos and in live streams about the importance of the church in preserving mythology. I think that the onus then was on me to put up or shut up and to show how that might have been the case. So I hope that you understand the motives for putting this stuff together, and I hope it answers some of the questions. I will say that, not being a scholar of medieval Irish history, I'm coming to this rather fresh. I'm a little bit wet around the ears, as they say in Ireland. I'm not well versed in it, but at the same time, it fascinated me. It always has done. How a lot of our myths ended up being written down by Christian monks. But as I say, hopefully we'll have answered some of the questions now. Laura Puente says, good afternoon, hello, and welcome to you. Julianne Osborne is watching. Hello, Julianne. Fáilte. Donna says, why does it not surprise us that you're using a typewriter? Love that, says Donna. Yeah, going back to when I learned to type as a kid, I learned on a mechanical typewriter, and it's lovely. You know that you have this imprint of the moment that you create something that you don't have when you put it into a computer file. You type a keyboard, and my keyboard is wireless. It's not even wired to the computer. So the information passes through the air as zeros and ones. It passes through circuitry and ends up on a hard drive or an SSD drive somewhere. It's an entirely different thing to compose a book by writing it with your hand or typing it on a mechanical typewriter. As I say, the sheets, the original manuscript is there from the moment, from the get-go, Anyway, we'll start. It's nearly half an hour in, so I think I better shut up and get on with it, as the man says, or the woman says. And so the subheading for this, so I call it Scribes and Kings, Religion, Politics, and the Medieval Manuscripts of Ireland. And the subheading would be, because I've used it so much as a phrase in some of our explorations, the incursions of Christian scribes into the early lore of Ireland in the manuscripts, and specifically dealing in some parts of this with how the Christians actually, the scribes actually altered the texts. It is a remarkable fact that a great deal of Ireland's mythological material from past ages available to the student of mythology and fable today was written down in the Middle Ages by Christian scribes based in monasteries in different parts of the island. The mythological traditions, especially those dealing with the pre-Christian pagan notion of the other world, quote, were taken up with enthusiasm and adapted in various lyric forms by the monastic writers, unquote. And where possible, I will refer to the sources, and that's from Pruntius Macauna's Irish literary tradition, which is contained in A View of the Irish Language, edited by Brian O'Keefe. And we are very fortunate and indeed glad that they chose to do so. Rowan Grove, correct. If the myths had not been written down, we would not have them, or at least not as much of them. It is an interesting thought, wrote Celtic scholar Pruntius Macauna, that had it not been for the tolerance and intellectual curiosity of the monastic literati, very little of the old literary heritage would have been ours now to enjoy. Their heterodoxy is our boon. And of course, by heterodoxy, I mean the fact that some of the scribes, and it may not be fair to sort of paint them all with the same color brush, but some of the scribes would certainly have been in the situation where, being acutely aware of the older lore and also being Christians, they perhaps had more than one faith. And I know some people are going to find that controversial. Bear with me. The scribes are copying, now this is a quote, are copying to preserve a heritage, that has been handed down, not often composing afresh. And so it is that almost all our early texts are anonymous or have been given some legendary attribution to Finn MacCool or to Columkill or to Saint Benignus. So I'm just highlighting something there. Even on the reread now, I'm seeing stuff that's valuable. That quote, was from Miles Dillon's Seven Centuries of Irish Learning. Medieval scholars have long been aware of the fact that the old belief system, in quotes, coexisted with Christianity in Ireland for a number of centuries in the early medieval period. And so just to quantify that, or to clarify, some of you are hearing Coda the dog is making his voice heard. When we speak in Ireland of the medieval period, we are talking about that period beginning with the arrival of Christianity, 5th century, St. Patrick, 433 AD, 432 AD, depending on which source you take, up until the arrival of the Normans in 1169 in the 12th century. So approximately speaking, the 5th to the 12th century is the early medieval period. While Christian literate culture inspired many of the early vernacular Latin and Irish texts, it is still possible to extrapolate some of the genuine pre-Christian or pagan religious practices from these texts. Mael Mura Machelachar, I think that would be the precursor of the surname Kelleher or MacKelleher, principal scribe of Laur na Hire, the Book of the Dun Cow at Clonmacnoise, quote, would have had access to the oral tradition within the bardic schools, which had kept knowledge of the ancient legends alive, unquote. And that is from Michael Slavin's The Books of Ancient Ireland. A later authoritative contributor to Laur na Hira, made corrections, interpolations, and added notes, and in places, quote, he so vigorously erased some of the other scribes' work to make room for his own that he rubbed holes in the vellum, unquote. I remember that, you know, as a kid in school, when you wrote with a pencil and you used the eraser, you know, that sometimes you go so hard at it, you'd tear a hole in the page. Mark says some monks may have had the title Christian, but followed the old beliefs because they saw God/goddess in nature. Yes, indeed. Well, they certainly in some cases were a little bit on the fence with regard to what exactly they believed, it seems. The material which makes up Laur na Hira was drawn from early sources, including manuscripts from other monasteries, which had been described as, quote, the product of the heroic age of Irish literature, that time between the 7th and 9th centuries, when king and monk and poet cooperated in a passion of memory and creation to build up the legend of the Irish past. Isn't that lovely? I'm going to read that quote again just after I tell you. That's from Robin Flower, The Irish Tradition. I will be, as I said, showing you a lot of the sources afterwards. The product of the heroic age of Irish literature, that time between the 7th and 9th centuries, when king and monk and poet cooperated in a passion of memory and creation to build up the legend of the Irish past. Fantastic stuff. I love that. Rowan Grove says, my observances, personal opinion, is that a fair lot of folk in rural Ireland are rather polytheistic even now. Correct and right, Rowan. Very astutely observed. The main aim of Laur na Hira was to preserve ancient pre-Christian lore, according to Irish manuscripts expert Michael Slavin. But because the scribes were religious men writing in a monastery environment, it should be no wonder that, quote, material of a pious nature was interspersed, unquote. And again, this goes back to that favorite phrase of mine when I'm speaking of this subject, the incursions of Christian scribes, that, you know, material of a pious nature was interspersed. Now, let me just check on where I'm going in terms of time. Oh, we're okay. This is a good pace, I think. The Book of Leinster, which was actually properly titled Laur na Nuchonvala, or Nohoval, I think is how it's properly anglicised, included a note at the conclusion of the epic story Táinbó Cúilge, written by the sole scribe of the work, which read, quote, I place no credence in this story or fable, for in part it contains the deceptions of demons, in part the invention of poetry, in part the appearance of truth, and in part not, and in part the delectation of fools, unquote. And that is from Charles Dunn, Ireland and the 12th Century Renaissance, from the University of Toronto Quarterly. The delectation of fools, you know. I place no credence in this story or fable, even though I've spent the last probably 6 months laboriously scribing at the desk, you know, pouring it out onto vellum for the purpose of preserving it for the future. The material of the Book of Leinster, mythic, historic, and poetic, represented the collection of material by a, quote, a scholar anxious to put together some of the chief literary works of his time. And all pre-importation of coffee. I know, Rowan, how did they stay awake, you know? I mean, if you've been at Glendalough, the picture for today's graphic shows the scribe's desk. It's a recreation of a scribe's working area in a scriptorium it's in the visitor centre at Glendalough, the monastic site in County Wicklow. And it just kind of brings to mind, with all the modern conveniences of heat and light and comfy chairs with cushions on them, I still get exhausted sitting here typing and writing. At the end of a long day and a long night, the neck is sore and I'm stretching the arms and the muscles. The eyes are bloodshot and watery, hanging out of my head. I'm rubbing them and I'm like, oh, geez, I need to go to bed, And I can just imagine being in a cold scriptorium with feeble candlelight. And remember, of course, in those days, you had no correction of eyesight issues. So if you had any eyesight issue, it went uncorrected. A lot of people probably had deficient eyesight, especially the older scribes. As they got older, the handwriting probably could have got worse. However, they managed to keep it very neat and there's something wonderfully artistic about the old manuscripts, It was literally a work of art. It's like calligraphy, except for an exceptional form thereof, because again, you don't have ready access to the raw materials. Vellum is an expensive commodity, ink is an expensive commodity, and having the right quill, all part of pre-Gutenberg, pre-printing press, all of that, the pre-printing mass reproduction of texts era. So that, the cold would keep you awake, says Paula. Good point. Yeah, probably a cold draft coming through all the time would keep you on your toes. But, like in order to make a copy of a book, you had to write the whole thing word by word, So it brings to mind the incredible feat. We think about the labors of the Neolithic monument builders as incredible feats. But this is another sort of very, very remarkable feat of human sort of physical endurance, and mental stamina, It is helpful to understand, too, that while the compilers of the medieval manuscripts were ostensibly Christian, some of them had a heritage that stemmed from pre-Christian times. The Yellow Book of Lecan, for example, was compiled by a member of the MacFurbishy family at Lecan in County Sligo. Such families were, quote, more than historians, for they carried in their genes a deep and precious strain of wisdom and learning that had its roots back in Druidic times. Nora Gaffney O'Connor has joined us. Fáilte. Hello, Nora. Welcome along. Good to see you. Don't think you could sneak in without us noticing you. The most expensive colour for medieval illuminations was that vivid cobalt blue made from ground lapis. Yes, indeed. Hard to come by. Natasha Komisky says, Glendalough is my Wednesday afternoon walk. I'll check that out. Brilliant stuff, Natasha. Good stuff. Kathy May Deo is in the house, says, good day, Mr. Anthony, all the two. Glad I made it on my lunch break. Beautiful fall sunny day here in Washington State. Welcome, Kathy, and have a great evening or a great afternoon. Probably still, it's the early afternoon for you, isn't it? Sorry, where was I? Yes, that had its root back in Druidic times. Their aura of sacredness came not from ordination in the Christian church, but from an inheritance, a conviction and a reputation for knowing that had its origin back in pre-Christian Ireland. Nolan Proctor's in the house, says, Lawa Anton Augustua Giagich, Tronowa. Nolan, pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable, join the gang there, and make yourself a brew. Following the arrival of St. Patrick, they found refuge in the monastic structures of the Celtic Church. But after the reform of St. Malachy in the 12th century, they were perhaps less than welcome within the walls of the great Cistercian and Benedictine abbeys. Thus were the great bardic Brehon law and historical schools of the O'Dignans, MacEgans, O'Dailys, and MacFurbishy established. An inauguration ceremony of the O'Dowds, which involved the MacFurbishys, described in the Great Book of Lecan, contains, quote, a delightful mixture of Gaelic druidic taboos and the salvation beliefs of Christianity, unquote. The two worldviews, paganism and Christianity, could, it seems, coexist. Perhaps the best example of a narrative from an Irish medieval manuscript that combines apparently irreconcilable cultures, Christian and ancient Druidic on one hand, and Anglo-Norman and ancient Celtic on the other, is the tract in the 15th century book of Lismore called Achaló na Seanórach, commonly known in English as the Colloquy of the Ancients or the Tales of the Elders of Ireland. Margaret Kiernan is in the house. Oh, I thought you were saying hello. You're saying wow. Yeah, this I agree. By the way, wow, it's incredible when you go back and just think about, you know, what must it have been like for a scribe who was still very much wedded or fond of or reluctant to let go of, you know, the old bardic traditions and the old lore of his ancestors. And at the same time hearing that, you know, only those who believe in the one true Christ and the one true God can have redemption and can be saved. It must have been very interesting times, you know. I read a novel, says Neil Hughes, many years ago, which I can no longer remember the title or the author. The hero/anti-hero joins the monastery as he is an escaped slave. He and his scriptorium mate make their fun by inserting side notes and jokes that only they get. Yeah. And there are some really bizarre ones. Marginalia, I think Kelly Edmiston referred to those earlier on. Shelley Williams says, hello, a good reason why history is so important. Thank you, absolutely. And I suppose what I'm demonstrating here rather keenly and a little bit late to the party, if I'm truthful, is that it is perhaps a foolish pursuit to study Irish mythology in particular without having some cognizance of the early medieval history of the island, and especially this whole subject of how religions and political views mixed. Perhaps yes, I did read that. In the Colloquy of the Ancients, St. Patrick and his followers are joined by ancient leaders of the Fianna, dating from several centuries previously, Oisin and Coilche, as they make their missionary journey around Ireland. Patrick is, quote, distracted from his Christian duties as he listens to tales of times past when the Fianna were at the height of their powers under the leadership of Fionn, unquote. One of the many overarching themes of Achaló na Seanórach, or it's pronounced properly in Old Irish, Achalov na Seanórach, is the general harmonizing of the values of the warrior elites, the royal dynasties, and the church. And I think in that sentence, you have the whole thing in a microcosmic view. The general harmonizing of the values of the warrior elites, the royal dynasties, and the church. Ecclesiastical scribes were often bound to political duties which might have grated with their Christian conscience. As one book on early medieval Ireland says, quote, it may be unwise to make too clear a distinction between politics and religion. Everything that we know about kingship throughout the world shows that the creation of a king is a religious act. And I want to tell you whose work that's from. I think it's Brannock or Stout, one or the other. Yeah, it's Adele Brannock's The Kingship and Landscape of Tara. And this is another quote. Since this institution was of such fundamental importance to the people, its Christianization must have taxed the early clergy to the limit. In other words, in a lot of cases, they didn't have any choice. The scribes, and we'll get to that, the scribes were often acting not only on the orders of the abbot, but also on the orders of the provincial king. And sometimes, by the way, the abbot or the bishop and the king were one and the same person. That's how convoluted it gets. Ecclesiastical foundations, such as the monasteries of Clonmacnoise in County Offaly and Clonard Abbey in County Meath, had close associations with kings and political dynasties. Clonmacnoise with the kings of Connacht, and Clonard with various competing political dynasties. And here we go, because I just hinted at it there. At Cashel, the early 10th century king Cormac MacCullonan was also a bishop. A bishop and a king. So having all of the weight of the political power and not having to necessarily bow in obeisance to the church, because all he needed to do was take off one hat and put on the other. No separation of powers back in those days, huh? Powerful patrons, this is a quote, endowed the large monasteries, placed members of their kin in important positions in these institutions, and thus created great ecclesiastical lordships that owned land, people, and smaller churches. That is from... Sorry, I'd like to give you the footnotes. They will, when I publish this, again, that's Brannock 2014. When I publish this, all the footnotes will be with it. I'll publish it on the blog sometime in the coming week. And this is very interesting thing about powerful patrons endowing the large monastery. So since I was a child, my parents used to take us as kids out to Mellifont Abbey, which is, only a couple of miles outside the road from Drogheda here. And you'll have heard me talking about Mellifont an awful lot over the time because the Cistercian order, which established Mellifont in the 12th century, became very powerful in terms of land ownership in the area. And I think I've mentioned on more than one occasion that they were the ones responsible for the name of New Grange, which was previously known as She Machanogue or She Angasa or Brew Machanogue, Brew Nabonia, Sheedon Broga, etc., etc. But it became New Grange because the Cistercians farmed their granges, or the Grange, and the New Grange was the name that stuck thanks to the Cistercians. But we used to play there among the ruins, and it had been excavated. I can't remember exactly when Mellifont Abbey was excavated, sometime I think in the 1950s or the 60s. And the interesting thing was that in the floor of the church, now the church was expanded. There's a 12th century church and an expanded 13th century church, and only the sort of stubs of the columns and the walls remain. The foundations. It's down to like a few feet off the ground. Nothing substantial remains. But there are all these sort of concrete markers on the floor, which were the places where they had found burials. And for years and years, I had this belief that, wow, isn't it lovely that all the bishops and the monks, or whoever they were, not necessarily bishops, but, all of the monks and the abbots, when they died, they were buried in the floor of the church. Until one day I was at Mellifont and I happened to be speaking to one of the tour guides there, and I said, when were the burials taken out, and just getting into sort of general chat about it. And then happened to say, it's interesting though, isn't it? Like, because you still see, in a lot of more modern churches, you see bishops and parish priests and that sometimes buried under the floor of the church. And she said to me, no, they're not the monks and the abbots. I said, well, who are they? She said, they were the patrons of the church. They were the ones who had given large endowments to the church. The monks were buried outside the church, which is fascinating. So you could nearly sort of, for centuries it was the same. But this is one of the points that undoubtedly grates with people, is the fact that this is something that some people would say unites or is a common thread between the medieval church and the modern church. The fact that it is inextricably linked to property and money and politics. You know, the fact that you could basically, apparently it was the local king. McCarroll would be Maccarroll or O'Carroll. Dermot, is it Dermot O'Carroll or Dermot Maccarroll? The local king was the one who had granted the Cistercians a great swathe of the lands that they ended up with. And so it's an interesting one because they're a foreign order there. They come from Clairvaux in France. And St. Malachy decrees that that's where they're going to set up at the shores of the little tributary of the Boyne called the Mattock River. And from there, they became very, very powerful, the Cistercian monasteries, and they established a daughter monastery at Bective Abbey, not too far from the Hill of Tara, actually, a few miles away. Where just today, by the way, on a total aside, a Hollywood movie featuring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck called The Last Duel was being filmed at Bective Abbey today. So there you go. In the 8th century, as kings became more closely affiliated with the church, ecclesiastics became increasingly entangled in secular affairs. Churchmen, says medieval scholar Matthew Stout, took part in battles, and the great monastic sites waged war against each other in the Midlands. The coalescence of church and state can be seen, says Stout, in the writing of secular tales within monasteries. The Toynbee Cúilge, for instance, the great epic tale of the cattle raid of Cooley and the battle for the bulls between Queen Maeve of Connacht and the Ulster armies, was first written down at this time. While it would be wrong to suggest that the medieval Irish poets and Brehons were crypto-pagans, i.e. a pagan who maintains a pretense of adherence to Christianity while observing pre-Christian practices in private, by virtue of their very office, which was to transmit the Seanchas or tradition, they consciously or unconsciously retained many druidical traits. In fact, Old Irish literature obtained its luxuriance and originality from the fruitful collaboration of monk and filly, filly being an Old Irish word for a poet or a seer. The early annals, all of them, were, quote, entirely the product of the monastic schools, unquote. All of the great monasteries kept annalistic records in detail, and the monks, quote, felt no scruples about recording, unquote, even the battles between the monastic communities. Only the later chroniclers, Michael O'Clery and his associates, compiling the famed Annals of the Four Masters in the first half of the 17th century, engaged in editorial censorship by dutifully, quote, cutting out entries which they felt might be pius oribus offensum, in other words, offensive to pious ears. The heroic epic stories and tales of voyages and visions allegedly emanating from Ireland's pagan past were committed to vellum either in the monasteries or by those who had received a monastic education. But the myths were, quote, viewed through the prism of monastic scribes to meet the taste of a secular audience of the educated, privileged classes. Pagan Tree says, what's he reading from here? I'm reading from an article that I wrote myself, which is going to be published on the Mythical Ireland blog in the coming week. Previously only available to Mythical Ireland patrons, but that's what I'm reading from, something I wrote myself. Just making sure I'm not missing any questions. Good. Okay, I think I'm up to date. Nora says, if the monks hadn't taken down the stories, where would we be? Exactly. Against this background, it would be perhaps gullible to expect those overtly pagan myths, which had previously been transmitted orally, to be propagated unaltered by ecclesiastical scribes. The infiltration or ingression of Christian doctrine into overtly pagan mythology is regularly seen in the medieval manuscripts, perhaps as a means of attempting some sort of reconciliation between the two. In the metrical Dindshanachus story about Douth, for instance, which records the story about how and why the great monument at Brunabonia was constructed, the comparison of the mound with the Tower of Nimrod would appear to be a clear incursion of Old Testament perspectives into pre-Christian onomastic lore, or lore relating to place names. It is well accepted, says our friend Dr. Lara Cassidy of Trinity College Dublin, quote, that biblical narratives and local pagan mythology were woven together in works like the Dindshanachus. Untangling the two is a complex task, unquote. Absolutely right, Lara, 100%. We have tried very hard to do so. It's very difficult to know, isn't it? Who's right, or which parts are we right about? Or are we just utterly wrong in everything we say? The frequent mention of Judgment Day in the old written myths is clearly an infiltration of Christian eschatological belief into the stories. In Baile in Scoil, the Phantom's Frenzy, a regnal prophecy composed in the 9th century and revised in the 11th, Con ascended the rampart of Tara before sunrise and stood on a stone that screamed beneath its feet, so that its cry was heard in Tara and all of the plain of Brea. His druid told him that the name of the stone was Foil, and that it would remain in the land of Talchu until the day of judgment. The number of cries which the stone uttered, the druid told Con, is the number of kings that there will be of your race until the day of judgment. Unquote. The origin poem about Douth, given under Cnogba or Nouth in the metrical Dindshanachus, prophesies that after the men of Éireann abandoned building the great monument, this is Douth, it would remain without addition to its height. Quote, it shall not grow greater from this time onward till the doom of destruction and judgment. Unquote. It is clear that when a particular myth proved excessively repugnant or challenging to the scribe's own beliefs or doctrine in certain details, alteration, insertions, and even perhaps expunction of particulars were practiced. It was, says James Henthorne Todd in the introduction to his translation of Cogu Gael Rigaliev, The War of the Irish with the Vikings, quote, unfortunately, the custom of Irish scribes to take considerable liberties with the works they transcribed. They did not hesitate to insert poems and other additional matter with a view to gratify their patrons or chieftains and to flatter the vanity of their clan, unquote. Of course, not to mention, of course, to appease the abbot. It is to be feared, he continues, that for the same reason they frequently omitted what might be disagreeable to their patrons or scandalous to the church. And it's even interesting, Henthorne Todd's Cogu Gael Rigaliev is probably at least a century old. I'll just grab it here and just see when it was originally, 1857, 19th century when it was published. Disagreeable to their patrons or scandalous to the church. Surely, in order of preference and importance, in order of levels of gravity, the church should come first and the patron second, But hey, I'm not making any judgment about that. In fact, scholars submit that the entire work of Cogu Gael Rigaliev was, in essence, a panegyric. In other words, a text in praise of someone, on the Dalcassians or the Dáil Chois, a small tribe of northwest Munster. and particularly of Brian Borova, or you would better know him as Brian Boru, who became High King of Ireland in 1002 AD, and their achievements against the Vikings. A corresponding tract called Cathain Ceiliúcháin Cashel, The Triumph of Ceiliúcháin of Cashel, is a pseudo-historical work of propaganda in praise of Ceiliúcháin, a king of Munster of the Oganacht clan based at Cashel, ancestor of the McCarthys and the O'Callaghans, written in the 12th century but relating to supposed events of the 10th century. And Brendan says, so nothing has changed in modern journalism. Well, there's a phrase or a saying, a catchphrase in tabloid newspapers in particular, which says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. On occasion, the scribe would add a note or gloss rather than directly interfering in the tale. At the end of the Book of Leinster version of Táinbó Cúilnge, the scribe wrote, Amen, and, quote, a blessing on everyone who will memorize the Táin faithfully in this form, and not put any form on it. One might have been forgiven for thinking that the scribe enjoyed the story, but not so, because he followed it up with these written remarks. I, who have copied down this story, or more accurately, fantasy, do not credit the details of the story or fantasy. Some things in it are devilish lies, and some are poetical figments. Some seem possible, and others not. Some are for the enjoyment of idiots. I love that. Brilliant, you know? A blessing on everyone who will memorialize this or memorize this faithfully. And then he says it's a load of tosh. Excuse me. Where was that? XXXIX. I'm just looking at my footnotes here. That's from, the wonderful Thomas Cahill's How the Irish Saved Civilization, which is another book we'll mention at the end. A more conservative, ascetic, and perhaps fundamentalist branch of the church, known as the Céilí Dé, the clients or servants of God, and Céilí Dé is anglicised to Culdee, Culdee, emerged towards the end of the 8th century. This was a movement which was clearly concerned with a shift away from the overt association between the early medieval church and the secular dynastic chiefs. This movement's purview was to, quote, counterbalance a tendency towards laxity in the older churches, unquote, and celebrated what it saw as a victory of the Irish church over paganism. And of course, and this is a poem. Just give me 1 second, I'll tell you where the poem is from. From the Martyrology of Angus of the Céilí Dé. The old cities of the pagans, wherein ownership has been acquired, by long use they are waste without worship, like Louis' house site. The cells that have been taken by pairs and by trios, they are Rome's, with multitudes, with hundreds, with thousands. Heathendom has been destroyed, though fair it was and widespread. The kingdom of God the Father has filled heaven, earth, and sea. Ironically, heathendom, these are my own words, far from being obliterated, found its old lore preserved on the leaves of vellum by monks and scribes of Ireland's medieval monasteries. The fact that it had been blended with Old Testament narratives so that it would sit better with church authorities mattered little. This lore, myth, and fable had been propagated, or at least preserved, rather than expunged, thanks to those dedicated Christian writers who laboured long and hard to transcribe them. And here is a quote. Early medieval Irish society had its own creation myths, and it had constructed and written down in the languages of the people and of the church the direct link between the Irish people and the Old Testament. The Irish language itself was regarded as being comprised of what was best of every language created at the Tower of Babel. unquote. Lawer Gawala Éireann, the Book of the Taking of Ireland, commonly known as the Book of Invasions, is a substantial quasi-historical work that attempts to trace the origins of all of the various peoples who arrived into Ireland in the remote past. It begins with a chronicle of the dispersal of the nations, and the first of the arrivals into Ireland includes Kildare, and we did an episode of her in the first week of the lockdown, in the first week of Live Irish Myths, the granddaughter of the biblical Noah, who has been refused a place on the ark and comes to Ireland on Noah's advice. R.A.S. McAllister, who translated Lawer Gawala Éireann, said that it begins with a liber occupationis hiberniae, which he describes as a sort of quasi-historical romance, with no backing either of history or tradition, an artificial composition professing to narrate the origin of the Gael onward from the creation of the world or the flood, their journeyings and their settlement in their promised land, Ireland. They wrote in Irish language, not Latin. A lot of our myths were written in Irish, but they wrote the earliest of all the manuscripts, the pre-Norman, the pre-sort of Brian Boru era, are Latin. But most of the mythological tracts were written in the Irish language. This production, McAllister says, was a slavish copy. We might almost say a parody of the biblical story of the children of Israel. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the importance of remembering that I'm more of a nativist than an anti-nativist in terms of, I believe that, I have written quite a lot about myths that I think have a sort of a genuine long-standing tradition in Ireland, in pre-Christian Ireland. So there are two sides of that debate. One is the anti-nativist that says, look, as McAllister is saying here, Lawer Gawala was a copy or even a parody of the biblical story of the children of Israel. It's important to understand the influences of the scribes, notwithstanding all the stuff I've said about the Milesians and the Dedanids, perhaps relating to the Neolithic people being replaced by the Bronze Age culture and all of that stuff. A 12th century reaction of the authorities to the secular control of churches was a work of ecclesiastical reform initiated from abroad, it seems, by Pope Gregory VII and at home by St. Malachy, resulting in the Synod of Rothbresel in 1111, which marked the transition of the Irish Church from a monastic to a diocesan and parish-based organisation. And the Synod of Kells in 1152, by the way, I think that's known as the Synod of Kells and Mellifont, isn't it? I must just clarify that before I put this on the blog. I think it's the Synod of Kells and Mellifont in 1152, which further defined the diocesan system and increased the number of archbishops from 2 to 4. And may I just take this moment, because I see that Gillian Gogarty has actually joined us. At the outset of tonight's broadcast, Gillian, we extended our heartfelt sympathy to you on the loss of your mother, and just to say that you have our sincerest condolences at this time. The primary purpose of this whole movement of reform, according to one scholar, was, quote, the prizing free of churches from control by local secular families who had turned the churches and the church property into private possessions passed on to their children like a field or a horse by inheritance. I just want to again refer to the notes as to where that's from. Ryan, 1961, which I imagine is from a chapter of Miles Dillon's 7 Centuries of Irish Learning, yeah. This period of reform represented something that historians refer to as a 12th century Renaissance. But it had an antecedent in the 11th century, partly driven by the efforts of Brian Boru, following a very chaotic and bloody episode during which the Vikings, and sometimes Irish kings, had repeatedly raided, plundered, and burned the monasteries, which were centres of learning and civilization. After making a circuit of Ireland to receive the pledges of all the provincial or local kings, Brian erected also noble churches in Éireann and their sanctuaries. He sent professors and masters to teach wisdom and knowledge, and to buy books beyond the sea and the great ocean, because their writings and their books in every church and every sanctuary where they were burned and thrown into the water by the plunderers, from the beginning to the end. And Brian himself gave the price of learning and the price of books to every one separately who went on this service. Something that's very important to remember here is that this is literally true. We do not have any manuscripts containing Irish mythological tracts before Laur na Hire, and Laur na Hire is early 12th century, I think. Yes, it's early, isn't it? Early 1100s or late 1000s. I think it's early 1100s, and that is the earliest. It has been said of the 10th century. I hope I'm right now here. Is it the 10th or the 11th? Yeah, it's the 10th century of the 900s. It is said that the reason we don't have any manuscripts from that period is because of the chaos, the bloody chaos that reigned on the island at that time. And this internecine battle or war between the Irish provincial kings and the Vikings. And sometimes they were on the same side, Irish kings siding with some of the Vikings, fighting against Vikings who perhaps had sided with other Irish kings. The radical reform of the church in the 12th century, initiated by St. Malachy, the founder of the Cistercian monastery at Mellifont Abbey, County Louth, and authorised by the synods of Rath, Bresel and Kells, began a long period marking the decline of storytelling and saga among the learned classes, which was also quite adversely affected by the coming of the Normans before the end of that century. The change, this is a quote, brought about a transfer of the heritage of manuscript tradition from the monasteries to the lay scholars, the fili of ancient times, who later appear in separate schools of poets, historians, lawyers, and leeches. From then on, quote, kingly storytelling gave way to storytelling of a less exalted nature. And that is from, typical me to put my footnotes in Roman numerals that I can't immediately decipher. That is from, again, yes, Dylan. Yeah, we'll mention the quotes in a minute. And to conclude, but greater disaster was to come in the form of the calamitous conclusion to the 9 Years' War, with the defeat of the Gaelic lords and their Spanish allies at the Siege of Kinsale, the signing of the Treaty of Mellifont in 1603, the ensuing flight of the Earls in 1607, and the plantation of Ulster. But that's a story for another day. And so there you have it, folks. That is my article, which will hopefully become a long read blog post on the Mythical Ireland website in the coming days, tentatively titled Scribes and Kings, Religion, Politics and the Medieval Manuscripts of Ireland. Should mention, as I promised to do throughout, I wanted to mention some of the sources for the blog post, and probably one of the most valuable was actually the smallest in terms of its physical size, and that is this wonderful production called 7 Centuries of Irish Learning, edited by Brian O'Keefe. It is a summary of the Thomas Davis lectures. It was published in 1961. This is a 1971 reprint. And so the title of the talks or chapters are The Historical Background by John Ryan, Literary Activity in the Pre-Norman Period by Miles Dillon, The Professional Poets by David Green, Lawyers and Chroniclers by D.A. Binchy, Irish Storytelling After the Coming of the Normans by Gerard Murphy, Irish Medical Men and Philosophers by Francis Shaw, S.J., The New Love poetry, The New Love Poetry by Sean O'Toma, The Development of Early Modern Irish Prose by Sean McArt, and an Era of Upheaval by Brian O'Keefe. Now, this, I believe, is only available secondhand, but that was the one that was most referenced in the article that makes the basis for tonight's episode. So, also mentioned a very, very important work. Anybody who's studied medieval Ireland, kingship manuscripts and all of that, the Hill of Tara, etc., will have come across Francis J. Byrne's Irish Kings and High Kings. I think Francis Byrne passed away in the past couple of years. By the way, interestingly, this is a signed copy, which is wonderful to have. I bought this secondhand. This is a must-have. You cannot study the period, and you cannot study Irish High Kings, etc., without having Byrne on your shelf. A very wonderfully produced book and really beautifully illustrated is The Ancient Books of Ireland by Michael Slavin. And if you've ever been to the Hill of Tara and you've been into the old bookshop is run by this author. Now, the last time I saw Michael up there was before COVID. I hope he is keeping safe and well during the pandemic, because he's very fresh looking for a man who's actually I think he's in his early 80s, but an incredible scholar. And of course, like myself, a wonderful collector and a wonderful, well, I'm not saying I'm wonderful, don't get me wrong, sorry, that's not what I meant. A collector and a purveyor of all of these books of wisdom pertaining to the past. And anyway, this was published by, I think it's Wolfhound Press, or is it? Yes, Wolfhound Press in 2005. And you'll just see there that throughout, it's very well put together. It's in full color, and there are sections about all of the manuscripts, including some pictures of the manuscripts themselves. And it breaks it down. It tells you chronologically which books came first, and then there's lots of interesting little sections dealing with exactly what we've been talking about tonight: the political situation at the time and the relationship of the church to those in power. Often gets a mention. Brilliant book, and one that you could probably read if you're an avid good reader. It's just over 200 pages, and that is Thomas Cahill's very well known How the Irish Saved Civilization. In terms of medieval studies, I really, really like Matthew Stout's Early Medieval Ireland, which was published last year or the year before, 2018, I think. One of the reasons I like it is because the maps make it easier to understand what is a very complex period of history. Wordwell Books, I think it's 2018, 2017 actually it was published. And so at the beginning of every section, there's a map showing you all of the political movements and things that occurred, and all of the areas, the kingdoms and provincial boundaries. And often cases there are arrows showing how Mumu and Media campaigns in the early 11th century, for instance. But the other thing I really like about it is that there's a pronunciation guide. So in the margin, where there's an Irish name, there's a phonetic English pronunciation of it. So if you're not a scholar of Irish, and to be honest with you, if you're not a scholar of early Irish, like I'm not, even if you know some modern Irish, it still doesn't help you. Trying your knowledge of modern Irish doesn't help you. But you have all of the pronunciations in the margin. Another wonderful, two wonderful books by an exceptional scholar are Ireland in the Medieval World, AD 400 to 1000, Landscape, Kingship and Religion by Adele Brannock. And that is published by Four Courts Press. And another book by the same author, Adele Brannock is the editor, and that is The Kingship and Landscape of Tara, which is a very academic work, but a fabulous work and an absolute must-have. If you're interested, you can get these facsimile reprints of a lot of old material. In this case, this is a Scholar Select facsimile reprint of Cogu Gael Wigaliev, the war of the Gael or the Irish with the Vikings. And do you know what? They're very cheap. They're quite reasonably priced, these. And as I say, facsimile reprint with the Irish text on one page and the English translation on the other. And last but not least, this isn't all the sources, but they will be listed in the footnotes when the article is published. The Irish Tradition by Robin Flower, and that was published by the Lilliput Press in 1994 originally. Actually, sorry, first published in 1947 by Oxford University Press. The Rise of the Bardic Order, Exiles and Hermits, the Founding of the Tradition. Another very interesting work that you can't be without. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode. Patricia Patsy O'Malley Boyd says, hi, did I miss anything? Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but you missed everything. You can catch up on the video afterwards, Patricia. And I will be publishing what I've read from tonight. I will be publishing as a blog post on the website in the coming days. Hope you all enjoyed that, and hope it's given you a little bit of a window into what is a very complex period of history, and also one that's kind of that it's important to have cognizance of in studying myths, to understand that not everything is not exactly as it always seems when the myths are written down, and especially when they're written down by Christian monks. Why would Christian monks write down pagan mythology? I think you might have some of the answers now anyway, you know. So good night to everybody. Thank you all for your comments tonight, and love to see all the interactions. It's brilliant. I love to see that. Don't forget, in the meantime, keep washing your hands, keep using hand sanitizer, socially distancing, wear a mask if you're on public transport or in anywhere where there's going to be people or crowds. Ireland, at the moment, the numbers are going up dramatically here all over Ireland, and we're regressing and unfortunately facing more restrictions. It may come to the stage in the not too distant future when I will be restricted in terms of the distance that I can travel, which means the monuments will probably be off bounds to me. So maybe I should get out there quickly in the next week and try to capture some of the atmosphere there before we get completely locked down. Anyway, in the meantime, that's all we can do. Is try and give some semblance of community and keeping ourselves keeping each other company, at least. I missed also Kerem Gogus is watching on YouTube. Hello, Kerem. Good to see you. Hope you're well. And Naomi Serafina, who says Banachti Orav. A few people still commenting on YouTube. I might hang around that. Somebody, Pagan Tree. I had Elva Johnson as tutor for early medieval Irish module in UCD last year. Brilliant stuff. In the meantime, hopefully this will quiet the dissenters, says Anne. Yeah, it's just, I think that there are some people who perhaps, as I say, who have a chip on their shoulder with regard to the modern church. And I'm not going to get into that discussion because the modern church, of course, in Ireland has been dogged in a quagmire of scandals, which is one of the reasons a lot of people have sort of moved away from the traditional church. But you can't really equate that with what went on in 12th and 13th century Ireland, I don't think. But however, this whole thing of, religion and politics being intertwined, it certainly has much more ancient origins. It's not something that's just arisen in the last century or so. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed yourself. We'll see you all next week, if indeed we don't congregate again for some impromptu live streams from out in the landscape. Yes, Robin says, I guess watching the winter solstice sunrise from inside Newgrange may well be impossible this year. It will, because nobody has been allowed inside the chamber of Newgrange since March. Except of course for staff, but there's no visitors allowed in there now at the moment, and I can't see that being the case for the foreseeable future. So that is the way, c'est la vie. That is the way things are at the moment. And somebody mentioning 1918 history repeating itself. Yeah. We don't learn the lessons, do we? We don't learn them too quickly or easily. Anyway, good night, everyone. As I say, what are the phrases that I have to finish off with? Slán go fóill, which means bye for now. Colusov, sound sleep. That's if you're going to bed. Ichawa, good night. And my latest one, which is Tog go bugay. Take it easy. Take it handy. And we'll see you all. If not, this time next week for episode 120 of Live Irish Myths, we might see you for some impromptu live streams between now and then. All the best, everybody. Banachti agus sláinte ó glán na bóine. Bye-bye. Good night.